Knowledge and being. We can now turn to knowledge and being. The teaching studied here notes there are two sides in a person that must develop in the gradual course of their transformation, the side of knowledge, and the side of being. We have learned that one must first begin to know this system, which takes time and effort. However, it leads to a definite development of knowledge, and at the same time should lead to a development of self-knowledge if an individual is willing to work at it. It is therefore not difficult to understand that there are different levels of knowledge. But it is not as easy to understand that there are also different levels of being. Let's try then to understand once more what being is. People usually confuse existence with being. A stone exists, a plant exists, a man exists, but they exist quite differently. It is here that the idea of being comes in. For example, the being of a stone, the being of a plant, the being of an animal, the being of a man and the divine being are all on different levels. The being of a thing is from its origin, but its existence is from birth, and conception takes place before birth. So let us then take the being of animals. All animals have existence from birth. A horse exists, a dog exists, a cow exists. They have a common existence. But the being of a horse, the being of a dog and the being of a cow are quite different, and are not from birth but from conception. Let's then consider humankind. Man is different from the animals. His being is capable of a definite development. He is born as a self-developing organism, and so is incomplete at a lower level of being than he is destined for by his creation. Animals are complete. As distinct also from animals, man's upbringing extends over a very long period, during which he acquires many things in his being, by education, by imitation, by custom or by circumstance. This is one reason why the being of one man is not similar to the being of another. We can understand that the knowledge of one may not be on the same level as the knowledge of another. But we do not so clearly see that their level of being can be different too. From the standpoint of this teaching, therefore, mankind is not taken as one and the same. People are not the same with regard to their being. The concept of man in this teaching is divided into 7 categories to begin with. Number 1, man, whose center of gravity is in his instincts and movements, in his physical life. Then number 2, man, whose center of gravity lies in his emotional life. Then number 3, man whose center of gravity can be found in his intellectual life. These 3 categories form mechanical humanity, the outer circle of mankind who do not understand one another. This is therefore called the circle of the confusion of tongues, the circle of Babel. Then there is number 4, man, whose center of gravity is not in the instinctive moving center, nor in the emotional center, nor in the intellectual center, but is as it were distributed among them. This is balanced man, in whom development is no longer one-sided, and in whom awakening has begun. There is then the circle of conscious humanity, number 5, number 6 and number 7 man, and these are individuals who have undergone different degrees of transformation or rebirth, development in short, who have had a new conception. These 7 divisions of the general idea of man mean 7 degrees or categories of being. So let's take number 1, number 2 and number 3 man. They belong to the circle of mechanical humanity, to mankind asleep, but show many differences with regard to their being. All 3 may live only under life influences, that is, influences, in other words, influences created in life from history, from the past, from custom, from culture, the media and the popular trend of things. But some may be affected both by influences A and influences B. Here B influences are not created by life, but come from outside mechanical life, from the circle of conscious humanity, and we are reminded that the Gospels are an example of B influences. Again, some people may be more under A than B influences, or more under B than A influences. Some may even have come in contact with a C influence, namely with someone belonging to the conscious circle of humanity, with someone who has been reborn, reconceived, just as the disciples came in contact with Christ, or the arahants into contact with the Buddha. Some may already be on the way to becoming number 4 man. All these different states mean different levels of being. We might notice too that the idea of a humanities level of being always enters into religious thought, and is regarded as more important than anything else. The level of being of a saint is different from that of a sinner. Good men, bad men, evil men, truthful men, liars, sincere men, patient men, hypocrites, self-righteous men, vainglorious men, and so on, are all terms referring to the side of being, not to the side of knowledge in an individual. Today people seem to be coming to think that what a man is does not matter, in view of what he knows. They even consider that a man with criminal being can be a great thinker, or a great scientist, a great artist or a great writer. Moving now to the knowledge of this work and its relation to our being. This work is given as knowledge, and so must be learned, just as any other kind of knowledge must be assimilated. However, this work comes from greater mind. It is not ordinary knowledge. It is knowledge about transformation, just as the Gospels are knowledge about rebirth or being born anew, and whether we call it transformation or rebirth makes no difference. It is knowledge coming from those who attained full inner development, and have reached by a growth and transformation of their being, the state of consciousness called objective consciousness. The knowledge taught in this work must gradually become your knowledge. We must know the knowledge the work teaches first of all, which of course takes time and effort. However, since this knowledge comes from a level of humanity far above our level of being, the full understanding of its many facets will not be possible until our level of being corresponds with the level of knowledge that the work teaches. As stated, a union between knowledge and being is necessary before understanding results. For this reason, this knowledge that we are studying must be applied to our being, and we will certainly not apply it if we do not value the ideas of the work. A parallel development of knowledge and being is necessary. That is, we must work on our being in accordance with the knowledge we are taught, to raise our level of being. With the level of being we possess at present, we will be able to understand the knowledge of the work up to a certain point. If we have something good in our being, then we will be able to understand something of this work and not merely know it. There is a saying that one must have gold to get gold. This refers to the quality of being that a person has. If there is good in them, they already have a little gold. No one can understand something beyond the level of their being. We should now understand why a person with bad being, a degenerate individual, a confirmed liar, a moral imbecile, a criminal, a deceiver and so on, cannot understand this work. We should also see why it is said with regard to new people entering the work, that they must be at the level of good householders, laymen or laywomen. But even so, they must be people who are looking for something, people who do not quite believe in life and who feel that there must be something else, some other meaning to their existence on this planet. So many things are said in the teaching about being that it is impossible to speak of them all at one time. Let one thing therefore be mentioned about being which is interesting when first heard. That is, your being attracts your life. This helps us realize the connection between what is outer and what is inner. To see from both sides of the mirror. For example, on a general scale, the level of being of mankind as a whole attracts war. If the being of mankind were on even a slightly higher level, war as it is today would not be possible. On an individual scale, a person's being attracts their life. It will always attract the same kind of things, the same situations, the same kind of friends, the same sort of people, the same difficulties and so on, no matter where the person is or where they may be geographically located. To change being is to change one's life, but to change one's form of life is not to change one's being. By altering your outside condition you will not change your life, because your being will continue to attract a certain kind of life. A horse attracts to itself a certain kind of life different from that of a cow or a dog, and you can understand that this is due to their difference in being. By changing its form of life, a cow will not change. You would not like a cow to sit with you by the fireside or be on your bed, not merely because it would be inconvenient, but because its being is so different from that of a dog. In general, you can see that the being of animals connects them with a certain kind of life. A weasel is attracted to the life of a weasel, a snake to the life of a snake, an ant to the life of an ant and so on. But we do not see in a similar way that the law which states that our being attracts our life holds true for the small difference of being in people. We have to, of course, study our being, to see that we have a certain kind of being, to study our life, to see that we have a certain kind of life. People do not easily see that they have very distinct and limited outlines. They think they are boundless and free. They think they can be anything they please, do anything they wish and live how they choose. But if one begins to study one's being, and at the same time one's life, we discover that we have a certain kind of being which leads inevitably to a certain lifestyle. This is a very long undertaking, and the work advises that the study of our being is absolutely necessary. We know this work says that we are machines, driven by external impressions. So as long as a person has no knowledge of their being, they are certainly a machine. For a machine cannot know itself. If it did, then it would not be a machine. But a man-machine can know itself. When a man begins to know himself, he is no longer a machine. He may indeed even become a man. But this takes a long time, and a great deal of effort. It takes a different kind of effort, of course, from that required to learn the knowledge of the work. That is, work on the line of knowledge, and work on the line of being, require different effort. A person cannot get to know themselves unless they observe themselves with their internal attention. And they cannot observe themselves intelligently unless they have been taught definite knowledge of what to observe, and see the reason for it. There are certain special factors in our being that prevent its development. One, for example, is negative emotion, such as self-pity and so on. These special factors must be known first of all as a matter of knowledge. And so we learn first the knowledge of this work. But then must apply it, so as to gain actual practical knowledge of our own being in the light of the teaching. Knowledge of our being is self-knowledge. But in this teaching it is a particular kind of self-knowledge, because the teaching points to certain things in one's being that must be observed and ultimately changed, through an increasing willingness to change them. Simply to know that negative emotions are bad and keep us at our level of being is not enough. It often happens that people do not observe themselves along the lines taught, or do not connect what they observe with what they are told. They take everything they think and feel or imagine and do and say for granted, so cannot see there is anything to observe. But how then can one expect to change oneself if we take everything in ourselves for granted? One is then a machine, not a man. It is strange not to be able to observe anything in oneself. A shock is necessary. But this often makes a person negative. Yet then they notice something in consequence. Everyone acts from the sense of good, from what they think is good. No one acts from evil. But a person acts from good according to their level of being, from what appears to them as good. A thief steals because he feels it is good to steal. A revolutionary shoots people because he thinks it is good to shoot them. So good struggles with good. Just as knowledge is relative, so is good relative. Good is relative to our level of being. What people regard as good is different in different cases. You may have noticed that what you thought good formerly you do not think good today. This means a change in your level of being. If our level of being changes only a little, we have at once a new perception of good. For example, perhaps you do not like to be as negative as you once were. This is due to a slight change in the level of your being. Knowledge of this work is about reaching a higher level of being, and so is about another life here. But it must be learned and verified through a personal application to one's own being, through self-observation and through private reflection about it. When its truth begins to be seen by you, for yourself, the driver or mind in you is beginning to wake up from its life sleep. When you begin to see the good of doing and living the work, your being begins to change. When you see it is good to remember yourself, good to stop internal considering, good to step aside from ridiculous illusions and pictures of yourself, from the vanity and self-conceit of false personality. Good to dislike your negative states, good to realize your own nothingness at times, good to struggle with identifying always, good to think of all the teachings of the work. Good to value it. All these and 1,001 other things. Then you are getting a new perception of good, and that means the level of your being is changing. Good of a higher or inner level is replacing the former level of good.